The San Francisco 49ers recently received some shocking news that's been stirring up quite a bit of conversation among fans and analysts alike. We'll dive into that quarterback controversy in a moment, but first, I just want to take a minute to express my deep gratitude to all of you who helped me reach 10,000 subscribers. Honestly, hitting that milestone is something I never expected, and I feel incredibly honored to have your support. To show my appreciation, my wife and I decided to give away a $50 gift card so you can add to your gear collection. The process is simple. All you need to do is make sure you're subscribed and like this video. I'll be gathering all of the people who've liked the video and randomly selecting a winner using a name generator. I'll announce the winner tomorrow in a pinned comment. The winner will then have 72 hours to confirm they've seen the comment and that they're the legitimate winner of the $50 gift card. You'll also find some important details in the description below. By entering, you agree to the terms listed, so feel free to check them out if you're interested. But in all honesty, it's really simple to participate. Just subscribe and like this video, and I encourage you to do so. Now, there's been a lot of debate surrounding Brock Purdy this offseason, and honestly, it's not that surprising. We'll get into that topic in just a bit, but before we do, there's something I want to share that I find quite fascinating. When you look at the context of his situation, it may not seem all that crazy at first, but bear with me for a moment. What people were expecting from Brock Purdy this season was more movement, more effort on the field, especially as he continued to grow into his role. But the truth is, he wasn't exactly in an ideal situation, and I think that's crucial to understand. For starters, he didn't have Christian McCaffrey for several games, which is a huge factor. On top of that, he was without Trent Williams in a number of matchups, and he had a rookie right guard who hadn't exactly proved his worth yet early in the season. The center of the offensive line was struggling, and the right tackle wasn't exactly a reliable option, especially after the postseason. The left guard did okay for most of the year, but still, Brock Purdy had every reason to feel some nervousness when he had to step up, and it was pretty clear in the first half of the season that he wasn't always comfortable. The 49ers decided to implement a more pass-heavy approach this year, which was different from previous seasons. And with Brock Purdy at quarterback, who's only in his second full season, it made sense to give him more responsibility, given how well he'd played up to that point. But this shift put more pressure on him, and honestly, I think it led to him moving around more than he should have. We saw this in the game against the Cardinals, where I was actually there with my wife. I noticed a couple of times that he showed a great ability to escape the pocket, and I was impressed with that, but I wouldn't want to see him running all the time. I was hoping the offense would be a bit more creative in some situations. That said, Purdy's ability to avoid negative plays under pressure was nothing short of incredible. When you look at the numbers, he finished 11th in rushing yards among non-running back players, which is honestly pretty impressive when you consider that last year he only had 50 yards. Despite having far fewer rushing attempts than most players ahead of him, he was still among the league leaders in scramble yards, showcasing his ability to make plays and, most importantly, turn negative plays into first downs. Even though he had way fewer rushing attempts than a lot of the players ahead of him, he still finished 11th overall in this area. Before reaching this level of success, Purdy was already making a name for himself as one of the top players in the league in terms of rushing yards outside the pocket. He was making plays and, crucially, converting negative situations into first downs, which, in my opinion, is one of the most important skills a quarterback can have. He finished 11th in rushing yards, even though he was running far fewer times than most of the players ahead of him. Although I mentioned 50 yards, I can't remember the exact number. It was just way lower in 2023 compared to 2024. In the previous season, he ranked 12th in sack percentage, which isn't exceptional when you compare it to other quarterbacks who threw at least 200 passes. However, in 2024, he ranked 5th in efficiency in terms of expected points lost per sack, which shows his ability to avoid sacks in a really effective way. That's a huge quality for a quarterback, and it's what puts him in the conversation with the league's best. Over the past few years, there's been a lot of back and forth about his play, especially from fans. It's not surprising that people are questioning his standing as the starting quarterback, because, let's face it, this kind of debate is common in football. When you voice your support, you're bound to get criticism, as we've seen in the past. The question that always comes up is he really the right guy for the job? And we all recognize his impressive talent, but there's still that lingering doubt. Later on, we'll dive deeper into some of the recent controversies surrounding his play. One thing I'll mention is that during the 2023 postseason, he put up solid performances in the games against Green Bay and Detroit. His mobility was a huge factor in those games, and to be honest, both games were somewhat underrated in the overall conversation. This year, his rushing attempts went way up, not necessarily by choice, but because it didn't seem like it was part of the game plan. Either way, he made it work, and the numbers back it up. He finished 5th in expected points lost per sack, which is pretty remarkable when you think about how much he was forced to scramble. It's worth mentioning that, as pointed out by an analyst, quarterbacks can sometimes end up creating pressure for themselves. According to Pro Football Focus, only 4 quarterbacks were more responsible for creating pressure on themselves than he was in 2024. And you can understand that when you look at the fact that he played several games without a top-tier running back, wide receiver, and left tackle. Confidence was also an issue. We didn't talk much about how the absence of one key player might have affected his performance, but even during the strong start to the season, the lack of effective passes was evident. Once that player was out of the lineup, he lost a trusted target. Still, there was this tendency for him to hold the ball a bit longer than necessary, leading to some avoidable sacks and tackles in the previous season, despite an offensive line that offered some protection. Pro Football Focus data indicates that he had one of the worst sack rates compared to effective drops in the league last year, which is a clear area for improvement. Exploring ways to improve his game, a few interesting questions popped up. One of them was whether his career is likely to improve or not from this point onward. I'm not saying this debate should be taken too seriously, but it's undeniable that he deserves recognition and compensation. The real question is whether he should be getting $35 million or $60 million, and that's a valid discussion. But there's also the question of whether the decisions made by the team will affect his performance in a positive or negative way, especially considering changes in resources in the system. Without a doubt, this is a conversation worth having. There have been comments suggesting that the team made things more complicated by letting go of an important player, and there's the tough reality of the salary cap situation, especially with another player's contract. Longevity of some players has also been questioned. So, it will be crucial to find replacements while investing in a quarterback who's earning $55 million a year. Some of the comments that have come up about this situation are certainly worth discussing, but I don't necessarily agree with them. How long will Williams keep playing? What about George? How long can we expect him to stay on the field? And then there's McCaffrey, whose future with the team is uncertain. The challenge is finding replacements for these guys, especially when you have a quarterback earning $55 million annually. There are definitely some important issues here that deserve attention, but I don't agree with all the points being raised. I don't believe Brock Purdy's performance will decline this season. If we're talking about whether he'll improve or get worse, I think there are plenty of reasons to believe he can get better. As for Debo's departure, will that impact Brock Purdy's performance in the upcoming season? I would argue that it will, because the connection between Brock Purdy and Deebo Samuel during training camp was pretty evident. Deebo was a primary target for him, and the chemistry was clear. But things have changed, and that doesn't mean Deebo doesn't still have value. I actually think he'll have a more productive season next year compared to last year. However, Deebo's importance to Brock Purdy may not be as obvious as it once was. Let's keep moving forward, because I do think Purdy benefits from having players who can win one-on-one battles. He also does well against zone defenses. But when he faces teams that employ a more aggressive defense, he often relies heavily on anticipation. He doesn't have the pinpoint accuracy that some other quarterbacks have, the kind that allows them to fit the ball into tight windows in key moments. That just isn't Brock Purdy's strength. But let's continue this analysis. Now, when it comes to the salary cap, the contractual situation of Brandon Ayuk doesn't concern me as much as it seems to concern others. Brock Purdy's contract is the bigger issue when we're talking about salary cap impacts. It's well known that some of the player departures were influenced by Brock's contract situation. How much longer will Williams keep playing? That's a valid question. So, it's critical to find replacements. The contract situation is definitely a big deal when it comes to salary cap implications. Some player departures can be attributed, at least in part, to Brock's future contract. So, how long will Williams keep playing? That's definitely something worth considering. At some point, we'll have to address the need for a new left tackle, especially because Williams is a Hall of Fame caliber talent. That's a tricky situation to manage. But we've already seen Brock Purdy adapt, especially during stretches where Colton McKivitz struggled with consistency. His escapability has been impressive, so I'm not overly concerned about that right now. The 49ers probably have at least one more year to find a suitable replacement. Let's see how that unfolds. There's also the matter of George Kittle's longevity. Ideally, we get a few more years from him. The same goes for Christian McCaffrey, who I think still has plenty of valuable years ahead. I'm not saying Brock Purdy's performance will drop simply because some of these players are getting older. In fact, I honestly believe McCaffrey is poised to have his best season in years. That may sound bold, but I think he'll be in excellent shape and ready to contribute in a big way. While there may be a slight delay at the start of the season, I think his health will be a major asset. This discussion has led to an interesting perspective. The real question is whether Brock Purdy's performance will decline from here on out. According to this analysis, he's maintained a steady level of play, but the results have varied based on the talent surrounding him in previous seasons. Looking ahead, replicating that level of support will be tough, and that could skew the perception of his performance. But I'm confident he'll continue to be the same player we've seen. It's a valid point. The situation is a bit different now because in past seasons, a significant number of players were recognized as the best in their positions league-wide. Maintaining that level of talent around Purdy will be a huge challenge in the future. So, the perception of him might shift a bit, but I'm still convinced he'll remain the same guy. That's something worth considering. I value this viewpoint, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Moving on, there's been some recent talk about quarterback rankings, and there seems to be a general consensus that the system of categorization is pretty reasonable. You all know how I feel about that. I'm not a big fan of lists like the top 5, top 10, or similar rankings. I don't find those rankings all that useful. I prefer a system that categorizes quarterbacks into different tiers, which allows us to appreciate their quality. Brock Purdy doesn't fit into the elite group, and that's okay. I accept that right now. There are only 4 quarterbacks in that tier: Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. No one else belongs in that group. So, if your team doesn't have one of those 4 quarterbacks, you're part of the 28 teams that don't have that level of talent. In that case, your goal should be to get as close to the next tier. Ideally, if you're one of those 28 teams, you'd want to be near the top of the second tier. In this second tier, we have players like Justin Herbert, Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, Jaden Daniels, C.J. Stroud, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, and Brock Purdy. I could debate including some players like Dak Prescott, but overall, I think this ranking is pretty spot on. Looking at the second tier as it stands now, it all makes sense to me. All of these players, given the right circumstances, could become elite quarterbacks, but if they find themselves in bad situations, they could struggle and have frustrating seasons. But I believe all of these players have the potential to break through and reach elite status. These players have the ability to shine or face major challenges, depending on the situations they find themselves in. If they're in the wrong situations with poor leadership or a lack of resources, things could go sideways. But I firmly believe that everyone in the second tier has the ability to reach the elite level. It's important to note that even when teams struggle, players from this tier tend to perform admirably, which isn't always the case for players in the third tier. Interestingly, there are some notable absences from this ranking, including highly paid and well-known players like Trevor Lawrence and Tua Tagovailoa. While I still stand by this evaluation, I know that many people may disagree, especially when it comes to Trevor Lawrence, who seems to frustrate a lot of Jacksonville Jaguars fans. I value your opinions in the comments, as always. Switching gears a bit, I want to touch on this idea of supporting cast, which I mentioned earlier. There's been some interesting insights shared by key leaders this week. This topic had already been discussed, but it's clear that the team's ongoing efforts to replicate past success each year have a significant impact on how they shape the current roster. It's been acknowledged that this discussion is closely tied to the draft strategy. This offseason is expected to be a learning experience that could shift away from a mentality of always trying to repeat previous successes. This perspective is especially intriguing for a team that invests high-level resources year after year. The team has proven itself to be exceptional, but when challenges arise, they can be highly critical. An analysis of the 2024 draft class for the team highlighted its potential, which I think is notable, especially considering the fact that they haven't been particularly aggressive in free agency to make significant acquisitions. It seems like the opportunity for big signings is past. So the real question is, how will the team handle the challenges around their supporting cast to develop a more effective system instead of just trying to replicate old strategies? The team is clearly not making big moves in the market, and it looks like the opportunity to do so has passed. So, how will the 49ers handle the questions surrounding their supporting cast to develop a more effective system, rather than simply repeating past approaches? A recent analysis of their 2024 draft class revealed that last season for San Francisco was a bit disappointing, but that can't be blamed on their draft choices. The guard they selected in the third round performed well, registering a .33 wins above replacement and ranking 6th in his position. Despite issues in the secondary defense, the performances of several players helped offset these challenges. One player selected in the first round, despite being limited to 11 games, managed to accumulate a .12 wins above replacement with a respectable reception grade. It's worth noting that none of the rookies performed negatively in wins above replacement, which is a notable achievement. Now, as we reach the 16-minute mark in the conversation, it's time to highlight the main takeaway of today. Brock Purdy is an exceptional quarterback with plenty of qualities that excite me, and I firmly believe he's only going to continue to develop. The talent around him will need to evolve, and that process is already underway. Next season is going to look different, and we're going to leave behind some of the entertaining moments we saw from certain players in the past. However, a new culture is being built, with key pieces staying in place to support this new direction. I'm genuinely excited to see how the team approaches this draft. For me, this is the most anticipated draft in the era of the current coaching staff. I'm truly excited about the strategy they'll implement, as it's going to lay the foundation for the future of the team. If the 2024 draft is successful, it will put the franchise in a strong position to continue to have great drafts, which statistically tend to bring significant long-term benefits. We'll talk more about this topic, as it sets the stage for what's to come. This is the moment. If the 2024 draft goes well, all that's needed to become one of those teams with consecutive successful drafts is to understand that statistically, 2 back-to-back strong drafts tend to provide positive returns for years to come. So, if they pull this off and then have a strong 2025 draft, keep your eyes open, because these 49ers may start looking younger and better. We'll have to wait and see. Of course, the NFL draft is just 22 days away. It's crucial to stay informed and enjoy this content, as I'll be bringing you news and updates you won't want to miss. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to 49ers Zone and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the San Francisco 49ers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. The San Francisco 49ers are making waves in the NFL once again, this time with their aggressive pursuit of Green Bay Packers quarterback Jordan Love. Fresh off a stellar first season as a starter, Love's performances have caught the attention of multiple franchises, but it's the 49ers who appear to be the most determined to lure him away from Wisconsin. Despite signing a lucrative 4-year, $220 million contract extension with the Packers just last year, Love could find himself at the center of one of the most dramatic quarterback sagas in recent memory. Sources close to the situation indicate that the 49ers, still searching for the final piece to secure their first Super Bowl title since 1995, are willing to go all in to land the 25-year-old signal caller. With a roster built to win now and a quarterback situation that remains uncertain despite Brock Purdy's flashes of brilliance, San Francisco sees Love as the missing link in Kyle Shanahan's offensive scheme. The franchise's front office has reportedly engaged in preliminary discussions with Green Bay, gauging what it would take to pry Love away from the team that drafted him in 2020. The financial implications of such a move are staggering, given Love's $55 million per year contract and a hefty guaranteed money tied to his deal. However, insiders suggest that the 49ers are prepared to explore creative cap maneuvering and trade packages that could include high draft picks and key assets to make the blockbuster deal a reality. If completed, this trade would not only shift the power dynamics of the NFC, but also raise serious questions about the Packers' long-term quarterback strategy, especially with Love initially seen as the heir to Aaron Rodgers. While Green Bay remains firm in its stance that Love is their franchise quarterback, the growing buzz surrounding the 49ers' interest suggests that the situation is far from settled. The quarterback's relationship with the Packers is strong, but the allure of joining an offense loaded with elite playmakers like Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle could be enough to tempt Love into considering a fresh start in the Bay Area. The decision may ultimately come down to whether the Packers believe they can compete for a Super Bowl with Love, or if they are willing to cash in on a massive trade haul. As the NFL offseason progresses, all eyes will be on this developing saga. Will the 49ers pull off one of the most stunning quarterback acquisitions in recent history, or will the Packers stand firm and refuse to part ways with their rising star? One thing is certain, Jordan Love's future in Green Bay is no longer as guaranteed as it once seemed. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the San Francisco 49ers, make sure to subscribe to 49ers Zone and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.